problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, look, we're delighted to have so many people here tonight. We're not going to stand on ceremony. This man is very anxious to get started. But it's a pleasure to have him. Years ago, we used to go to Mayo, and I think there's a new man on the block now for Walkerstown, Johnstown and surrounding areas. And the amount of work he's doing, research on the ground as well. I think we're in for a great talk tonight. Talking to him during the week, I think that he has done his work. So I'll leave it to you, ladies and gentlemen, Christopher.
Thanks very much, sir. Thanks, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Guy, I want to thank you for coming along to this presentation, which I hope will deliver an interesting glance into the past and present of Johnstown Parish with facts, which we don't mind, anecdotes, which are good, 40-year updates, and maybe a few tales. So the first slide here is Johnstown, seen and heard, and the name reflects the nature of the observed and spoken history of a local community over many generations. It was thankfully collated and recorded in 1985 in a booklet of the same name by two local ladies, my own aunt, Katty O'Brien, and our friend Annie Delany, who was an aunt of the Golden Olympian Ronnie Delany. Not that that had anything to do with the talk, but anyway. As part of a national local history project at the time under the auspices of the Irish Countrywomen's Association, who were very far-seeing because a lot of this history would have been lost, and this was done all over the country at the time. So we're very much indebted to these two ladies and their colleagues in the Johnstown Guild of the ICA for their meticulous research, as it was, and dedication in the compilation of this absolute gem of a publication, which guarantees that a very significant amount of the vernacular history of Johnstown has been preserved for future generations. And it is fitting that their award-winning history, published in September 1985, should be exposed to a wider audience here tonight on its 40th birthday. It was launched in early September 1985. My presentation is based directly and extensively on, and in some cases verbatim, from the booklet and other references as follows: Screen and the Early Normans, 1994, by Elizabeth Hickey; The Medieval Fonts of Meath by Helen Rowe; the 3-volume Diocese of Meath by Dean Cogan; and the Kilcarn Font, the Great Apostolic Font by Father Michael Cahill; and the 800th anniversary of St Stephen's Church by Michael O'Brien. Various publications from the archives of Navan District Historical Society. I am also indebted to Father Kevin Heary, Parish Priest of Johnstown and Waterstown; Jan and Anthony Farrell, Pascal Murray, Councillor Francis Dean, Brendan Lyons, Paddy Daly, Patrick Stafford, Patricia O'Kelly, Mary McQuillan, Penelope Monaghan, Brie Cosgrove, John Steen, Declan Crinion, Barry O'Brien Lynch, Mary Wilkinson and Martin Oakes. Because they all use their local knowledge and invaluable assistance with this talk, in which I will draw on the booklet's information up to 1985 and then attempt to expand and bring it up to date by referring to the current parish situation, where some things have undergone significant changes and where some things have not changed at all. Last year in this room I had the privilege of addressing your august society specifically on the history of St Stephen's Church and Cemetery at Kilcarn, from before Norman times, along with its associated ecclesiastical history within the parish. And aspects of that history will naturally be repeated again in this talk, but in a far more concise fashion. So as there are many stopping off points on our odyssey tonight, the coverage will be more like a series of historical vignettes rather than a forensic analysis of each topic. So I'm not a historian, so my approach will be more colloquial than academic. While my presentation will concentrate on Johnstown Parish and most of its townlands, I will occasionally stray a little into Waterstown, Navan and Screen parishes, where they form a border with our chosen locality. Guy and I will attempt to recount with pictures old and new, a kaleidoscope of histories, stories, anecdotes of individuals and families, some who may have gone, and some, thankfully, who remain to this day. In other words, a living history, much of which will not necessarily be found in Main Street reference books. Okay? So we have the parochial map coming up. Yep. This is a parochial map from the mid-1800s, which I very kindly got from Pascal, who I think stole it from the bishop, or found it in the bishop's house. And it the diocesan parish of Johnstown, Walterstown, from the 1840s. Not a lot has changed, and why I'm using this map rather than the myriad number of maps that I used, 6 inches, 1 inches, Carta, everything digital, this actually sums it all up in one little sort of rectangle, for the want of a better word. So the pink is the other parishes, the nasty people. There's Navan, and Screen is down here, Kilmessan is over here, Beaupark, and Beaupark is over there. So it just says Johnstown, but in fact it takes in Walterstown. Temple Kieran should be added at this stage, because there's the church in Temple Kieran, which is part of the Blessings of the Graves, so it has to be in the parish. And just at this stage, when I have the map up, I want you to look on this as a triangle here. And if you just take a chunk off the triangle like that, roughly like that, and bear that in mind for what I'm going to say in a few minutes. And all that's up there, Boyneview House, not at Lumley House, Boyneview House, the Finger Post, Boyne Cottages, the Mercy Convent, the Loretto Convent, and out the Boyne Road there. And we can envisage this is Fardenstown here, we can envisage the new cemetery, or St Mary's Cemetery as it was called, or should be called. It was the new cemetery, now it's there about 150 years old, so I suppose not fair to call it new anymore. So just bear in mind that triangle and the rectangle, okay? So, ecclesiastically, Johnstown Parish is part of the United Parishes of Johnstown and Walterstown. They came together around 1831, and the parish is situated in the Diocese of Meath and the Deanery of Navan. That means there's a number of parishes in the deanery that work together, about 8. It's in the civil parish of Kilcarn, and reflecting its Norman origins, it's in the barony of Screen, where the Normans held sway from the 12th century, and which I gave plenty of talk about last year. At this juncture, we must remember that prior to the construction of Johnstown Church in 1837, a number of significant monastic settlements and smaller churches had existed over the centuries in various townlands in both Johnstown and Walterstown. These former places of worship, in some cases dating from well before the arrival of our Norman friends, are now remembered in ruins of varying extent or in name only, and we will reference them with respect in our parochial travels. And one thing about the monastic settlements and the clerical establishments is that in many cases, I won't go into a detail, I did last year, many of them are associated with souterrains, and there was certainly an underground movement at the time, whether it was for speedy exits or what, but most of any sort of substantial establishments had souterrains attached to them. In 1985, when this book was published, Johnstown was a small rural Roman Catholic parish, generally referred to as a one-horse parish, reflecting the priestly mode of transport of the day, and meaning that the parish had a parish priest only and no curate, as indeed is the case today. In fact, we're probably lucky to have a parish priest. The parochial population, however, has changed significantly since then, especially in one corner of the parish. The United Parishes of Johnstown and Walterstown adjoin the parishes of Navan, Beaupark, Screen and Kilmessan, and like all parishes are divided into a number of townlands, approximately 20 of which we will meet in our travels. Now, I was going to list out the 20, and then I said you'd have fallen asleep by the time I got to 15, so I'll mention them as we go along. So the parochial map shows the boundary of the Union then, but which now includes, as I said, Temple Kieran, also a significant portion of the parish was integrated into Navan Parish in the 1870s, and I'll explain why. We'll have a closer look at this area later. Otherwise, we're looking at a relatively unchanged parochial map. Geographically, Johnstown Parish lies under the shadow of the Hill of Tara and is bounded on one side by the majestic River Boyne, as it meanders from the Linter Bridge under both the new and the old Kilcarn bridges to the new St Martha's Bridge before it enters Navan to be joined by the River Blackwater on its way to the sea at Drogheda. According to Irish mythology, the Boyne was created by the ancient Celtic goddess Boan, and it has been described as Bowinda or Bowbinda, translated into Irish as Bofionn, the white cow, and known as Anvoin, or Aurnamoinia, and was known in the Middle Ages as Boandus. A derivative of that name is Bovinda, which is commemorated, in Bovinda House, the splendid headquarters of Meath County Council in Delany, which we will meet later in our journey. So that was taken from St. Martha's Bridge, and it's an absolutely stunning river. So a number of sources are referenced, apart from the Boyne and several small streams. The other significant watercourse, although on a much lesser scale, is the River Nanny, or Anya in Irish, or Anya in Old Irish, the origin of which provokes significant debate. A number of sources are referenced, including small streams at Brannanstown and Corballis. What is not in question about the Nanny is the significant watershed, and if you just go back to there's a significant watershed. The geography hasn't changed around here. That sort of marking there is a watershed. And as you can see, there's a river running this side and there's a river running that side. They can't really make up their mind where they want to go. That's in the townland of Morel, which is, part of it is called the Manor, which probably goes back to Norman times. And this is roughly where the golf club, that's not a golf club anymore. It's around there. So what a watershed is it's a wet area, it's a source of water deposit out of which one stream flows, but obviously it's served by many little streams. So the location is, it flows both east and west to the Boyne and east into a stream locally called the Follistown River, coming down from Carn Hill. And there's Carn Hill, which is our peak point here, just inside the parish, and it's coming down here, and it meets it there, just at Follistown Bridge, just goes under the bridge. That's Tony Dean's there. And from then on, it's fair to say that I think we have a river called the Nanny, and it flows through Kentstown, Duleek and Julianstown to the sea as the Nanny at that stage. And the debate over the source of the Nanny is reflective of the pride and affection generated by this very small but much loved water course. St. Patrick, in his travels around Meath, reputedly asked some fishermen on the Nanny for fish for himself and his hungry followers, but were refused, following which he put a curse on the river that there never would be a salmon caught in the river again. A suggestion which has improved slightly over time, as I understand from the Duleek anglers that they have caught salmon on some occasions. I'm not sure whether they were supposed to or not, but they were caught. They were there anyway. So St. Patrick must have relented. While the many ancient and historical locations within the parish obviously remain unchanged, most townlands in the parish have changed both in the built environment and with the associated rise in population density. But by far the most dramatic change in both of these areas has occurred in the 5 townlands of Johnstown, Kilcarn, Delany, Baylis and Alexander Aid. And that effectively, this is Delany, and then we have Johnstown. Johnstown is over here. Where is Johnstown? There's Johnstown, yes. And then you have Alexander Aid coming in there and Farkinstown over there and Baylis just in here. So again, we're talking about this built-up area. And this is the major changes that have been seen since my aunt's book. So now all of these areas, that's those 5 townlands, they're effectively a densely populated satellite of the town of Navan, which none of us, I suppose, saw 40 years ago. They comprise one large block of land, which was previously the Medge estate, spelled M-E-T-G-E, Medge. And after the breakup of this estate, embraced 3 working farms mostly, encompassing about 400 acres in that general area. And now it includes, instead of fields, large housing estates, a business park, a shopping centre, commercial premises, pubs, restaurants, a bookmakers, a funeral parlour and many more enterprises. The headquarters of Meath County Council and the local offices of the Department of Agriculture and others, both of which I work for, and most importantly, a large diversified population. In order to establish the boundaries of the parish, we must go back in time to the early 1870s, because why is it still not like this? Well, I'll tell you why. The Bishop of Meath at the time, Dr. Nulty, a very famous bishop and a fine Irishman, attempted to incorporate the parish of Johnstown into Navan, in a move which was not met but universally claimed by the people of Johnstown. It soon transpired, however, that the parochial house and farm at Pastor Hill, the parochial house and farm of Johnstown, this is an old photograph, and there's the new one, and it was sold this week. And it transpired that this house, and there was probably 15 or 20 acres with it at the time, that was the norm for many parish priests, particularly in the more affluent parts of the country, that the parish priest, Philip, his name was Philip Barry, and the owners of the property were the local Protestant landlords, the Ford family. Now the Ford family lived beside the Boyne at Kilcarn House, which is now Kilcarn Stud, and we'll talk about that later. If the parish priest were to be removed, in other words into Navan or wherever, then the parochial house and property would revert to the Fords. So this conundrum prompted Dr. Nulty to retreat from his position, and he compromised by incorporating a significant portion of Athlumney townland into Navan parish. And prior to this intervention, Johnstown parish had gone to the edge of the town, was bounded by the Boyne before and after it joined the Blackwater like a large triangle, with its apex at the confluence of the two rivers. And you can go back to the map again. So the new parochial boundaries were set by Dr. Nulty, delineated by two small streams flowing into the Boyne at the northeastern parts of the parish, closest to the town in Athlumney, and effectively cutting off the top of the triangle from Navan. So one of the streams arises in the housing estate called Athlumney Abbey. So I'm taking it's this little one here, beside Athlumney Castle. Athlumney Abbey is in Johnstown, I think Athlumney Castle is in Navan. And then the other stream is actually our friend, which comes from